Hey, Econ Warriors, it's your boy, the boss of economics, here to slice through the government's propaganda pie and serve you the cold, hard truth, spiced with a dash of data, a sprinkle of sarcasm, and a whole lot of economic realness. Buckle up, because today, we're diving into Greece's so-called economic turnaround. Is it a shining beacon of recovery, or just another smoke and mirrors trick from the mismanagement maestros in Athens? Let's break it down, from the surface fluff to the deep, dark economic underbelly. So, here's the deal, folks. S&P Global Ratings just bumped Greece's credit rating to BBB, 2 notches above junk, with a stable outlook. Cue the confetti, right? This is the third upgrade in just over a month, with Moody's, DBRS, and others joining the party, finally dragging Greece out of the junk debt dumpster it's been rotting in since the Eurozone crisis. Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis is out there popping champagne, bragging about budget discipline, primary surpluses, and early debt repayments, Euro 5 billion worth, to be exact, on loans not due until 2033-2042. Investors are cheering, Greek bonds are yielding less than Italy's, and GDP growth is outpacing the Eurozone at a cool 2.3% in 2024. Sounds like a fairy tale ending to a decade of economic misery, doesn't it? But hold up, Econ Warriors, before you start clapping like trained seals at a government circus, let's dig into the fine print. Because here at Boss Economics World, we don't swallow the spoon-fed narrative. We dissect it, roast it, and expose the rot underneath. So, grab your calculators and your skepticism, because this miracle might just be a mirage cooked up by the same clowns who drove Greece into the ground in the first place. Let's start with the shiny stats the government's waving around like a kid with a participation trophy. S&P says Greece's net debt to GDP ratio is set to fall by an average of 6 percentage points a year over the next 4 years. That's a big deal, right? After all, Greece's debt to GDP ratio was a monstrous 206% in 2020, the highest in the Eurozone. Now, it's down to around 160% in 2024, according to the IMF, and the government's patting itself on the back for fiscal discipline. Mitsotakis is also flexing with those early debt repayments, Euro 5 billion of bailout loans, paid ahead of schedule, signaling to the world that Greece is back, baby. And hey, the bond markets are eating it up. Yields on Greek 10-year bonds are now lower than Italy's, a country with its own laundry list of economic woes but a far less dramatic history of bailouts and default scares. Greek GDP grew by 2.3% in 2024, outpacing the Eurozone average of 0.8%, according to Eurostat. Unemployment, which peaked at a soul-crushing 28% in 2013, is now down to 9.5% as of mid-2024, per Elstat, Greece's statistics agency. Tourism, the golden goose of the Greek economy, is booming, with 33 million visitors in 2023, raking in 20 billion euros in revenue, and 2024 numbers are on track to beat that, per the Bank of Greece. Wow, sounds like Greece is killing it, right? Time to book a vacation to Santorini and toast to Mitsotakis genius. But hold your ouzo, folks, because here's where the government's victory parade starts to smell like last week's moussaka left out in the sun. Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, because the devil's always in the details, and boy, are these details ugly. First off, that debt to GDP ratio. Sure, it's coming down, but let's not kid ourselves, 160% is still a crushing burden, the second highest in the Eurozone after Italy. And those early debt repayments? They're not some heroic act of fiscal responsibility, they're a PR stunt. Greece isn't paying off this debt because it's suddenly swimming in cash. It's doing so because the European Central Bank, ECB, and other creditors are still holding Athens by the throat, demanding compliance with austerity measures that have gutted the Greek economy for over a decade. Oh, and let's talk about that GDP growth. 2.3% sounds great until you realize it's built on quicksand. Tourism, which accounts for 20% of GDP, is a volatile crutch, not a sustainable engine. One global recession, one geopolitical crisis, or, God forbid, another pandemic, and poof, there goes your recovery. Remember 2020, when tourism revenue collapsed by 76%? Yeah, me too. But hey, why plan for the future when you can just bask in the glow of today's headlines, right, Mitsotakis? And while unemployment is down, let's not pretend the Greek labor market is some kind of utopia. According to a 2024 OECD report, youth unemployment is still at 22%, and many of the jobs being created are low-wage, precarious gigs in the tourism and service sectors. Real wages have barely budged since the crisis, with the average Greek worker earning 20% less in purchasing power than they did in 2008, per Eurostat data. Meanwhile, the brain drain continues. Over 500,000 skilled workers, many of them young professionals, have fled Greece since 2010, according to the Bank of Greece. That's not recovery, that's a slow bleed. Now, let's get to the heart of the matter, Econ Warriors, the government's role in this mess. Mitsotakis and his crew want you to believe they're economic wizards, waving their magic wands of budget discipline and primary surpluses. But let's be real, This so-called discipline is just a fancy word for austerity, the same toxic medicine the EU and IMF have been force-feeding Greece since 2010. And guess what? It's not working, at least not for the average Greek. Primary surpluses, where government revenues exceed spending, excluding interest payments, sound great on paper, but in practice, they mean slashing public investment, gutting social services, and squeezing the life out of the middle and working classes. According to a 2023 study by the Levy Economics Institute, Greece's obsession with primary surpluses has shaved 4% off potential GDP growth since 2015. That's right, folks, the government's discipline is actively holding back recovery, all to appease creditors and rating agencies. And don't even get me started on tax policy. Greece has some of the highest tax burdens in the OECD, with a top income tax rate of 44% and a VAT rate of 24%. Small businesses, the backbone of the economy, are being crushed under a mountain of red tape and tax bills, with 30% of SMEs reporting they're at risk of closure in 2024, per the Hellenic Confederation of Commerce and Entrepreneurship. But hey, as long as the bond markets are happy, who cares about the little guy, right, Mitsotakis? Now, let's zoom out even further, because Greece's problems don't exist in a vacuum. The global economy is a tinderbox right now, and Greece is playing with matches. The Eurozone is teetering on the edge of recession, with Germany's economy shrinking by 0.3% in 2024, according to the Bundesbank. The ECB is walking a tightrope, trying to tame inflation, still hovering at 2.5% in the Eurozone as of Q1 2025, without triggering a full-blown debt crisis in countries like Greece and Italy. And let's not forget the geopolitical wildcards, the war in Ukraine, tensions in the Middle East, and a potential trade war between the US and China, all of which could send energy prices soaring and tourism tanking. Here's the kicker, Econ Warriors, Greece's recovery is built on borrowed time and borrowed money. The ECB's Pandemic Emergency Purchase Program, PEPP, and other bond-buying schemes have kept borrowing costs artificially low, but those programs are winding down. When the music stops, and it will, Greece's debt burden will become unsustainable again. Just look at the numbers. Greece's interest payments on its debt are set to rise from €6 billion in 2024 to €10 billion by 2030, according to the IMF. That's a ticking time bomb, and Mitsotakis is out here dancing on the detonator. So, what's the takeaway, Econ Warriors? Greece's economic turnaround is a house of cards, propped up by tourism, austerity, and a whole lot of PR spin. The government's obsession with pleasing creditors and rating agencies has come at the expense of long-term growth, social equity, and economic resilience. Sure, the headlines look good today, but the fundamentals are rotten, and the global storm clouds are gathering. Here's my advice to Mitsotakis and his cronies: stop chasing S&P's gold stars and start investing in your people. Cut taxes, boost public investment, and build a real economy, not a tourist trap. And to you, my Econ Warriors, whether you're a regular Joe worried about your savings or a finance pro trying to navigate this mess, keep your eyes peeled, because this miracle is one bad headline away from unraveling. Until next time, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and remember, the boss of economics has your back.